going, everybody? In today's episode of X-Mattingly Reviews Stuff, we're going to be taking a look at Prince Xizor and Dash Rendar from the subline Shadows of the Empire of the Star Wars Black Series line. So a little bit of backstory in case you don't know. Star Wars Black Series was a multimedia event that was launched in the mid-90s, right before Lucasfilm had decided to polish up and re-release the original Star Wars trilogy with new special effects that were kind of neat at the time. It gave some cool little extra scenes and that kind of thing, but in modern context, they look extremely dated. One way or the other, Shadows of the Empire was an attempt to kind of pull you back into the Star Wars universe, kind of get fans re-interested in the franchise and that kind of thing before they re-released the trilogy. And also, Lucasfilm being Lucasfilm, they wanted to make a lot of money, so they had a whole spread of stuff that was involved with this particular campaign. They had a video game, maybe more than one video games. They had comic books, they had novels, and of course, yeah, they definitely had action figures, and we'll talk about that in a bit. At the time, the Power of the Force line was fairly new on the market, and of course, the natural course was to add these figures to that line, so there were a bunch of Shadows of the Empire figures that were released as Power of the Force figures, and I've got a couple of those. We'll take a look at those in just a little bit here. But anyways, back to Shadows of the Empire. The timeline for that storyline occurred basically between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So essentially, while Han was frozen in carbonite and Luke wasn't quite a Jedi yet, and as we'll see with these two characters, they had released a bunch of major characters to kind of fill that story arc. But the funny thing, though, is that all of these characters conveniently just disappeared before Return of the Jedi, so that's why you never see or hear from them again, essentially. So in a sense, you know, when I say this was a little bit of a money grab by Lucasfilm, when you look at it in that light, how they just kind of inserted these characters and then pulled them out and we never saw from them again or heard from them or anything, that definitely feels like a bit of a money grab to me. But for myself, as far as Star Wars Black Series goes, I'm pretty much committed to collecting the original trilogy characters, mostly, at least right now, centered around the original Star Wars movie and Empire Strikes Back to a degree, and dipping a little bit into Return of the Jedi, but not to a great degree. So figures like these that come out on the market, at least for me, are a little bit of a nostalgia trip. I mean, we're talking like 30 years ago that Shadows of the Empire was actually a thing, so I had these figures, like I said before, and it was just kind of cool to see these come out on the market, kind of in brand new, greatly envisioned form or whatever. And I guess I will say that both of these figures were released this year. I believe Prince Xizor, can't remember exactly when he was released, might have been mid-year, something like that. I believe Dash Rendar just came out within the past month or so. Could be totally wrong about that, but that's at least what I think the timetable is for the release of both of these. So one way or the other. Take a look at their package real quick here. So yeah, standard black box here. You know, you got the cellophane wraparound window. You do have a very nice looking purple stripe here. When I say they're new to the Shadows of the Empire line, this is literally number 1 and number 2. There's more that followed, and I'm gonna pick up some more of these, I think. I believe there's a Princess Leia in her Bouche disguise that comes in a 2-pack with Luke Skywalker in an Imperial Guard costumes. Probably gonna pick that one up, and I'm gonna be looking for some more of these. So anyways, as far as this goes, yes, that's part of the tradition of this particular type of packaging. You have sort of a mural on the side. And they do appear in here sequentially, so you got a little bit of Prince Xizor overlaying on Dash Rendar. Don't know who number 3 is at this point, but I'm gonna find out here before too long. A little bit of bio on the back, not worth reading about that. Dash Rendar is a hired gun. That's his part in the story. And we'll talk about kind of where he fits in with that in a little bit here, but when we get into the figure details there. But Prince Xizor, for the most part, was essentially trying to usurp Darth Vader's seat as second-hand to Emperor. I guess he was on a power grab trip or whatever you want to call it, kind of the leader of a criminal empire called Black Sun. So yeah, we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. But enough about that. We do want to get into the unboxing here, so I want to talk about these figures. But before we get into that, one other thing I want to take a look at here is the figures that I had 30 years ago that are still mint in the box, never opened them in their packages. So this is Shadows of the Empire figures, Dash Rendar and Prince Xizor, as they appeared as Star Wars Power of the Force figures. Quite a bit of difference between these two and what we have here. Yes and no. Take a look at Dash here. This one, obviously, came with some extra incentives to try to get you to buy this thing. So he's got a gun and this sort of over-the-head, shoulder-mounted cannon assembly, whatever you want to call that. On the package is just listed as heavy weapons pack, so I guess that's what we'll call it. A little bit of a different look here. This version of Dash Rendar, and the one that most people who are familiar with Shadows of the Empire know him as, otherwise, is slightly redheaded with a little bit of a beard, either a light or a scruffy beard, one way or the other. Interestingly enough, though, his costume is very similar to what we saw from 30 years ago. They didn't change a whole lot with how he looks. So he's got sleeveless arms here, whereas the other one has a full jumpsuit. It does have that metal chest plate here and those goofy padded shoulder pauldrons, I guess. Still has a holster for his blaster, except this one's a functioning holster, of course. Yeah, and he's got these weird quilted sort of inner, midsection, inner thigh, whatever you want to call that. To a large degree, I would say that the new figure is a faithful tribute to the old one, except for the face. And of course, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Now for Prince Xizor, one thing that surprised me here when I pulled this guy out of his package is that the texture, the pattern here on his cloak is damn near identical to the new one here. So they absolutely paid tribute to that old figure. I was not aware of that until I pulled this guy out. And to be clear, I have not seen this figure in, 15 or 20 years or something like that. He's just been sitting in a box forever. Came with an interesting little doodad. It's called an energy shield, or energy blade shield, I guess. This figure comes with a staff, which I think is a little more appropriate to the character. Yeah, we're going to take a look at his head here. I mean, the ponytail on the back of this one is kind of, I don't know. Whereas this dude is just a straightforward ponytail. And being a more modern figure design, his claws are much more well-defined here. Even got paint for the nails and that kind of thing. So I would say the new figure is certainly a faithful tribute to the original. A little surprised to see how much they've kind of hewed towards the original on this design, though. Obviously some major improvements. Pretty good looking figure. One way or the other. Gonna get him out of the box. Something I did not know is that he has some claw strips on his elbows. It's interesting. So we got the staff. We'll take a closer look at that here in a second. And Xizor himself. And I'll just point out real quick here that I'm sure that among Star Wars lore, there is kind of like a standard or an accepted way to pronounce Xizor. I don't know what that is. I've always pronounced it Xizor. So just kind of fair warning, if you're following this review, that's just basically me kind of sticking with what I'm used to or what I've always called him. So let's check out this figure. So I'm going to say, at least as far as the Star Wars Black Series goes, this is absolutely a one-of-a-kind figure design. To the guys who are real experts and hardcore collectors, tell me if I'm wrong. This robe has to be completely original and unique to this character. I don't think we're ever going to see this design again on any other figure. Same goes for the hands and the arms. It's just completely unique to this character. The legs might be a different story. They probably are from another character. I'm going to guess they're probably from a Tusken Raider, maybe? That would seem to be most appropriate, but if not, they're original to this figure, and cool. So just kind of taking a closer look at this, I mean, the paint applications on this figure is beautiful. Got some nice gold, well, I guess this is gold plastic here, but within the hands, yeah, that's interesting. So what they did for the wrist is they painted it purple with some gold lining here, and then they went in and painted the nails on his super long, I'm assuming pretty damn sharp claws here. So I forget the race that Prince Xizor is from, but he's basically a reptilian type of person. You could probably get that from his green skin or whatever. Beautiful head sculpt for sure. They add a little bit of texturing in there, a little bit of brown tone there. The eyes look great. I think they're painted in nicely, so it's kind of that newer inkjet printed style. So yeah, you got some gold bands here, and I guess he does have that weird sort of double ponytail thing, though. The short one and the long one here in the back, so it's just not sticking out like it was on the Power of the Force figure, and that is interesting too. That's really nice. So you got this sort of reptilian crocodile spine or whatever going all the way up to the back of his neck, and even on the back of his head. Got a little bit of spine there, a little bit of scaling. So I love the texturing and detail on the robes here, and it's super layered too. So you've got this outer skirt piece or whatever, and this inner piece, and it's split, so I guess his legs can kind of be posed a little bit more. Stuck with him inside of like a plastic umbrella, if you will. But I would say, yeah, pretty much no matter how you pose this dude, he's always going to retain that sort of regal bearing. So very nice. Yeah, the chest plate looks really great. I love how this wraparound piece goes way up and over the shoulders, and then you've got this, it comes to a point, on the back end here. The only thing I'm not really digging about this is, I mean, this is kind of nitpicky, but it is a detail that's definitely a little off the mark, is this gold plastic absolutely does not match the gold paint. Looks good, it's just a slight mismatch. It's almost a little more bronze colored or brass or something like that. Now, as far as his staff, I think this is definitely a step up from that energy blade shield thing that he had in Power of the Force. Got a lot of great texture on this thing. I love this little, I don't know if you call that a pauldron or whatever, the knob on the end of the staff here. This is intended to be held up and, whatever like that. Got a little ribbon texture on there that's painted. Same for this middle grip here. A lot of texture on this thing, so going up and down this thing, it's not like they kept it to one style or whatever. They put texture all over this thing, all the way up to this Black Sun emblem right up here at the top. So as far as the staff, let's see how it fits in his hands here. And hold that straight out. So yeah, it looks like he can hold this staff in a variety of poses pretty darn effortlessly. That's very nice. We'll do a quick touch on articulation here, and yeah, there's not a whole lot that I would say is missing. I mean, you got pretty full range around the waist, tilting and rotation, whatever. The head can move pretty darn effortlessly. I wouldn't say there's much of anything at all that's missing from this, so yeah, you can definitely have him looking up, looking down, looking all around. He can give you a quizzical look, etc. Elbow rotation and bending up about, 135 degrees, something like that. Shoulder can go up and down pretty effortlessly. You're not going to get anything past 90 degrees, of course, because of this shoulder pauldron here. So, and yeah, as far as the robes, the legs don't seem to be hindered that much, to be honest with you. These are fully articulated legs. Interestingly enough, they are a newer style without the pin joints, so you got some rotation here in the hip, I guess. I don't see it in the thigh. Doesn't look like it's in the boot either. Knee can bend quite a bit, so, I mean, you could get him into some pretty dynamic poses if you needed to. So he could look like he's attacking somebody or whatever, because that's what princes do, I guess. I don't know. So a flying kung fu pose, I guess, if you will. Of course, some very, very dynamic poses. If that's your poison. That is pretty dang cool. All right, so let's jump into a figure rating. In case you don't know, this is my rating system for Star Wars Black Series figures with 5 categories with up to 5 points each for a total potential of up to 25 points. So the details on this figure are excellent. This is something that they absolutely did not skimp on. It's a one-of-a-kind figure sculpt. You're never going to see another figure quite like this in the Star Wars Black Series line, and it's a great tribute to what amounts to a Star Wars 30-year-old deep cut. So if you're a nerd for Legends and other non-canon storylines, this one I think is going to be a must-have for you. Articulation, surprisingly, it's pretty darn good. There is a minor amount of hindrance with the robes and the legs, but it's really not bad at all. I would say as far as other figures that do use plastic as a substitute for cloth for flowing type garments like robes and whatever, this is definitely one of the better ones that I've seen. I would count Xizor's overall costume sculpting and texture and his chest plate among its accessories. So he's a sneck with a lot of money, and it shows. Definitely has a royal bearing. They 100% got that point across with this figure design. Plus that staff, it's just a killer looking piece. Fortunately, Star Wars Black Series figures keep getting better. They keep improving their figure designs, and the quality on this one is excellent. Paint applications, I would say, are spot on. Joints are really good, not obtrusive. Little bit surprised that they didn't use some older style pin joints, but if they didn't reuse a newer leg type, they sculpted something new without the pin joints or whatever on it. Definitely didn't skimp on anything. My only very minor gripe is that the gold plastic is a bit of a mismatch to the gold paint. Accuracy for this figure, I would say, to the original character is pretty spot on. If anything, this is an enhanced version of that distinctive character from a few decades ago. So the total score I'm giving Prince Xizor is 21 out of 25. All right, let's get this guy out of the way here. And we're going to take a look at Dash Rendar. So it goes without saying that as far as what comes in the box, there ain't a whole lot to show off here. So you got the figure in all his glory and all his goofy costume and his pistol, and that's it. Before we get too far into it, I'm going to go ahead and put his blaster into its holster here. Interestingly, it fits in there backwards, so I guess Dash Rendar is a bit of a cross-draw. All right, so let's talk about this guy's details. So, as with Prince Xizor, this figure is pretty much a one-of-a-kind mold. You know, there are better experts than myself for Star Wars Black Series figures, but I can't see anything on this figure that's borrowed from another figure. Obviously, the head sculpt is completely unique. There's no other character quite like Dash Rendar, at least in the Star Wars Black Series line. The only thing that is not unique is that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. So this mold is pretty accurate, pretty faithful to the actual Shadows of the Empire character. But ultimately, I think this is kind of a goofy design. I mean, you've got this chest armor here, which is covered by these puffy shoulder pads. You got elbow-length gloves here. And you got a jumpsuit with a quilted pattern, and the pattern is on the interior, on the inside of the thighs and the midsection here. I mean, honestly, when they designed this character for this multimedia event, what were they thinking? So, as far as the storyline goes, Han Solo was frozen in carbonite during the events of Shadows of the Empire, so Dash Rendar is undeniably a substitute for Han Solo. I mean, as far as their justification for this character in Shadows of the Empire, or how he appears, is you never knew of him before. This dude conveniently comes out of nowhere. He's ostensibly hired to help out the main characters. He flies a ship nearly identical to the Millennium Falcon, and then conveniently fakes his own death and denounces the rebellion at the end. That was Lucasfilm coming up with a convoluted excuse to stick to formula while avoiding breaking canon at the same time. This mold itself is a slight sidestep from the character from the 90s. That particular character, as I showed you before, had a little bit more of reddish hair, a little bit of a scruffy beard or whatever. Overall, I do think the sculpting is a definite improvement though. So to me, this version is a weird mashup of Han Solo, of course. You got kind of the Marty McFly thing going on here. You got a little bit of a Prince Charming kind of knight in shining armor thing. Plus, he looks a hell of a lot like the guy who played Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. So I don't know, take it as you will, I guess, but that's kind of my impression of this particular mold. So talking about some accessories here, I mean, the chest armor itself is a pretty interesting piece. It's noticeably dinged up. They went to the trouble of giving him a little bit of weathering there. This guy's apparently seen some action. And you know, I will say that the texture on the shoulder pads do look pretty nice. I mean, looks like a puffy piece here. I mean, again, as far as this character's costume goes, I'm not sure I would necessarily call this dated, but it's definitely not well thought out in my opinion. So to me, it feels like something they just rushed to get the Shadows of the Empire campaign out the door so Lucasfilm could make some scratch before they release the original trilogy. Be that as it may, I kind of feel like Dash looks like he raided his grandma's linen closet and is wearing whatever he found. You got a quilt? Check. You got a comforter? Check. What's a little bit worse to me, as far as this character goes, is the convoluted fan fiction that kind of rolls out there in the public that people come with to justify these, you know, for all these goofy details and whatever. So as far as these shoulder pieces, no, it's not a puffy jacket. According to fandom, it's quote-unquote impact reduction survival gear. That's literally the kind of justification that somebody would come up with to explain away something like this. I don't know. Whether that's, you know, something you want to buy into or not, you decide. Just doing a little research on this character and his backstory to remember who he is and whatever, that's what I found, and I just thought that was kind of goofy. As far as the belt, yeah, I would say this is a one-of-a-kind piece. It looks great. Love how you have, and I mean, this is kind of Han Solo-ish itself, too. This big leather holster hanging off the side here, and these two belts, you know, one looping around the waist and one kind of on the hip or whatever. What's interesting here, this is only one of 2 Star Wars Black Series characters that I have that have this, but this dude's a cross-draw, apparently. That's how they set up the holster. It fits right there, in there like that. I'm going to assume that the intent there is that Dash Rendar is a southpaw. I don't know for a fact whether he is or isn't one in the video game, or if he's described that way in the comic books, the novelizations, anything like that. There are bigger experts out there who know this stuff better than I do, so if anybody happens to know for a fact if Dash Rendar is in fact a left-handed guy, I would be curious about that. I'd love to hear a comment. So what's in the holster? A blaster, of course, and it's not just any blaster. This is kind of what I was alluding to about, well, there's one piece that is not completely original, because that's Mr. Han Solo's gun. I mean, it's identical, which brings up another point of contention, and we'll talk about that. So again, Dash Rendar is basically entirely a substitute for Han Solo, and really not much else. So either the designers for Black Series were leaning into this character being a sub of Han Solo, or they were kind of trolling the fan base a little bit. Maybe that's a lazy bit of an excuse to do a little less manufacturing effort on this thing. I don't know. Could be a little bit of column A, column B, column C, could be a little bit of everything. As far as his articulation, is it pretty good? Well, there's one thing that I'm finding here that is not super easy to do, and that's the cross draw. So his arms don't really allow for him to reach way over, interestingly enough. And he can kind of get it over there if I twist his waist all around. Which, by the way, he does have very good waist rotation. kind of lifting right up and down, you know, all around kind of a 360 thing. You just can't reach that gun very well. For a modern figure design that's this advanced, I would expect a little bit better than that. Just kind of a little detail that's missing there. As far as his arm mobility, I'd say it's pretty good. Surprisingly, yeah, he can get his shoulders way up there. Pretty similar to Prince Xizor. He's got some crap on his shoulders and whatever that inhibit him just a little bit, but the actual metal shoulder pads do not inhibit him at all. Newer kind of ring design where it's just sort of attached way at the top there and can flex up and out of the way, something like that. So yeah, you got some wrist rotation, you got some elbow rotation, whatever. And yeah, that is interesting. The wrists can rotate, but they can't flex. They don't have a hinge on here. Well, no, I guess there is a little bit of a ball socket in there. So at least the left one can flex a little bit. I guess we can kind of turn that in a little bit. So as far as this gun, goes right in the hand there. That's pretty nice. And of course the head has full range of motion there, so that's pretty good. Legs can kick all the way up and out, and you got a great knee bend on there, just slightly past 90 degrees. The ankle doesn't appear to flex well. Yeah, it's sort of on like a notched hinge, so it won't just flex up and down. And I'm gonna assume that that's to give this character more stability so that that ankle doesn't get all loose and janky and he won't be able to stand or something like that. So the thigh rotation, he does swivel at the hips just a little bit, but then he can also turn at the knee. So that's kind of a new thing that they've been doing here with Black Series figures. Also at the boot, so you got this weird sort of triple thigh rotation going on here. So he can splay all the way out if you really wanted him to. You can do a power slide here, slide into action there if you wanted to. Pretty cool. As far as action figures go, yes, the costume is a little bit goofy, but I will say that this figure is absolutely designed and built to be an action figure, so he fits within that mold very nicely. Yeah, I can't say I've got any complaints about this figure's posability. Yeah, he hits all the marks as far as I'm concerned. Only minor detail there is, like I said, that cross draw. I can't quite do that, which he should be able to since that's how they built the holster. Minor slip-on detail there, but yeah, very well built as far as action figures go for sure. In a way, I'm sure this is not what they were going for, but it kind of hits that mark a little bit, just as a subtle bit of nod to the Star Wars Power of the Force line from the 90s where they're all muscle bound and, you know, whatever. So let's jump on to a figure rating. As far as Dash Rendar goes, I'm going to say the details on this figure are great. While there is a slight reimagining of this side quest character from 30 years ago, it's a good one. The design choices of the original character are kind of goofy, and I've said that before, but I think the designers for this version made the most of it and made some improvements where it really counts in some cases. Articulation is very good, surprisingly really well done. He absolutely hits the marks for an action figure. And again, the only beef that I have, which is kind of a minor one, has to do with not being able to cross-draw. And that's basically directly an observation of how this character was built with that holster. So again, as with new releases this year, yes, there was a brand new release of Han Solo, and I reviewed that one about a month or two ago. And I can't remember if Dash came out first or Han, but yet again, he's a copycat with a single blaster for his accessory. Really nice styling with his holster and chest armor too, though. The Dash Rendar mold has excellent quality, its paint applications are spot on, joints are really good and not obtrusive. So overall, the quality of this figure is pretty darn good. Got no complaints about it at all. Paint applications, I think, are pretty minimal on this particular figure. You know, there's nothing that's missing or out of place or anything like that. Just for the way this figure's built, it's appropriately done for sure. So as far as the accuracy category, I'm not so sure you could hold this figure to a quote-unquote accuracy because the character Dash Rendar was actually conceived as a one-and-done type character, while the redhead with the beard, you know, the scruffy unshaved look or whatever, kind of held in the public view for a long time. I think because of the nature of this character and, you know, just kind of his obscurity, there is a little wiggle room for kind of a little bit of reimagining and some improvements in some ways. And this, I think, definitely is both of those, but also very nicely and appropriately reimagined. And that brings the rating for Dash Rendar to 18 out of 25. So that's a look at Prince Xizor and Dash Rendar. Pretty damn cool figures. So as far as whether these two are worthy of any Star Wars Black Series figure collection, that's kind of up to you. I mean, if you're willing to dip into kind of an obscure, I don't know if you would even consider this Legends, basically a subline, something that's fairly obscure from 30 years ago that never resurfaced again. Yeah, I would say definitely worth the money. As far as pure action figures go, these are great figures. In my opinion, I think they're both worth $25 for sure. One way or the other. I really enjoyed taking these guys out of the box and checking them out and doing a review and showing this to you. If you happen to enjoy this review, please feel free to leave a like. Definitely leave me a comment. I like hearing from people. Share it with a friend, the usual social stuff, you know, just whatever. And I will be back around with content before you know it. So thanks for your time, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.